And then Miss Hawley said to me, matter of fact as she was, she said, I've just done an interview. My mind went blank. I can't do this anymore. Now you do it. Wow. And I looked at her, I said, okay. And then I asked her the question. I said, Miss Hawley, how does it feel giving something up you were so passionate about? She looked at me. Passionate? How can you possibly be passionate about a database? She said, I've never been passionate about anything in my life. And I said, hey. And she said, well, when I start something, I finish it. And now you can continue.
Hello and welcome to the Duffel Shuffle. I'm Adrian Ballinger, and we're here to discuss the world of climbing and skiing in all its forms through the eyes of mountain guides.
And I'm Sam Kiekefer. In each episode, we'll unpack exhilarating stories, share invaluable insights, and get up close and personal with some of the most experienced and passionate guides and athletes in the industry.
Whether you're a seasoned alpinist or a weekend warrior, the Duffel Shuffle is your ticket to the thrilling world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. Join us. Welcome back to episode 33 of the Duffel Shuffle Podcast. And so much has changed. I don't even know where to start. But we have a great episode for you today, an interview with Billi Bierling. She's kind of this incredible wealth of knowledge about climbing in the Himalaya based on her role running the Himalayan Database, which she took over for a famous person in the climbing world named Elizabeth Hawley. And we talked to Billi about everything from what the Himalayan Database is and why it's important to her climbing experience to this past season on Everest and some of the wild things that happened this year and have been changing in the industry. But before we get to that interview, I am here with my co-host, Sam Kiekefer. No, this is not Sam. Emily Harrington, why are you here?
Sam had a baby, another baby. So I'm filling in for Sam because he is indisposed, taking care of 2 children now.
Yes, it's the best. We'll save all the details for when Sam's back so he can tell us all about his new kid. But we're so excited for him. Sam, congratulations. You're totally missed on the pod, but I'm really excited you're getting to spend this time with your family and just starting to build those bonds with kid number 2. I can't decide whether I'm jealous or relieved that I'm not in Sam's shoes. How about you, Emily?
Yeah, jury's still out. I'm excited for them. They went for it. Yeah, we're still in that mode where we're not sure about number 2.
We're obviously really close with Sam and his wife, Susie, and their kid number 1 is actually younger than Arrow. And they just had kid number 2. So this is not a kids and parenting blog, but wow, they're on it. And it's going to be fun to watch, to say the least. And meanwhile, most of our listeners probably know Emily. Emily's obviously my wife, partner, all that fun stuff, main adventure partner. Emily's also a professional climber for the North Face. You were on episode 1 or 2 of the Duffel Shuffle?
Something like that. The very beginning,
as a guest. Have you been on twice or only once?
No, just once.
You recorded from Switzerland.
Yeah.
But it's pretty fun that you're filling in. I'm excited about it. Where are you right now, Emily?
I'm in our bedroom in our condo in Palisades. We moved out of our house because it's rented for the month of July, but we had to remain in Tahoe. You can explain why.
Yeah, it's probably pretty obvious why for anyone watching the video, but hopefully not for those listening to the podcast. But yeah, I mean, we've never done an episode on kind of like ski town living as a mountain guide and professional athlete. But Em just mentioned one of the things we do to make it work is actually leave for a couple of months each year, specifically to rent our house during the busiest times in Lake Tahoe. So that's essentially the month of July, and then usually a couple of few weeks over Christmas and New Year's. We have this amazing 1966 cabin that we just love so much in Tahoe, but it's it's hard. It's hard to live here. We talk about it quite a bit on the podcast. We hear about it from friends and coworkers at Alpenglow Expeditions and athletes trying to make a go of it here. It's obviously a really expensive place to live, but it's also a really magical place to live. And one of the ways we've made our finances work for a long time is actually to get out of town and rent our place and move into our van for a few weeks each year. And it's kind of fun. Forces us to keep our house really clean and organized, because when we rent it, it's like we don't live there. Do you enjoy the process, Em, or do you hate it?
Oh, I think we're pretty good at it now. We kind of have it dialed, the whole move out thing. You just have to think of it as work because, obviously we're going to be making money while we're gone. And so you just think of it as a work day. And I do like the declutterization that it forces us to do probably every few months. Like we definitely keep a tighter ship because we can't handle having more stuff. So that's great. It makes me feel like our lives are pretty organized, honestly.
Yeah, I totally agree. It really works for me. And it's just something we do. We've done it ever since we started dating 12 years ago, basically, with our condo first. So yeah, it's just part of our scene. So yeah, Emily's in the bedroom. I'm in the living room of a condo in Palisades where we temporarily are. We were meant to be on the road in our van, climbing up in Idaho and Wyoming. And unfortunately, I've terrible skin, no surprise, for 30 plus years of living at high altitude in the mountains and being a fair-skinned Brit. I go to a dermatologist every couple of years. Turns out I had a couple of cancerous melanomas. They were caught early, superficial, not a big deal. I'm going to be fine. But my doc wasn't comfortable with me waiting a month or so to get them dealt with. So a week ago, I got one cut out of my chest. And then yesterday, I got one cut out of my nose that actually needed a skin graft and kind of a full extensive process. So right now, for those watching the video, I have this sick, clown nose bandage on, as well as another one on my ear where they took the skin graft from. It was kind of rowdy. I mean, actually, mostly just science is amazing. They took a piece of my ear and rebuilt my nose, and somehow it's going to work.
Hopefully it's going to work. We hope.
Yeah,
it doesn't always work, which is why we're here. Because the doctor didn't want us living in a van for the next week.
Yeah, it seems like sometimes skin grafts don't take, especially if your heart rate's all over the place or you're working hard or hygiene's pretty important. So right now the skin, when the bandage went on, it was kind of wild. The skin graft is just this dead piece of skin. It's got no blood perfusion. It's bright white. It's not pink like it should be. But hopefully right now it's getting perfusion and turning pink. I'm going to get to see in a few days when I take off my clown nose. So yeah, it's definitely throwing a little bit of a wrench in climbing plans for the summer, for the next month. I was really excited to be on this road trip and trying to get stronger rock climbing after the long Everest season. But I feel pretty fortunate, knock on wood, not having a lot of injuries, being a pretty healthy human. And this is just old man shit. Throwing out my PSA, go to your dermatologist. Apparently had this not been caught early, it could be a way bigger deal. So if you spend a lot of time in the mountains, a lot of time in the sun, it's my PSA.
Get your skin checked.
Get your skin checked. So meanwhile, hopefully the next episode, 2 weeks from now, we'll be recording from the van and we'll be somewhere really beautiful pulling on limestone. But until then, today, Emily, what's your news item?
My news item, I was trying to think of something that had to do with rock climbing, but it's July and there's not a whole lot of high performance rock climbing happening right now in the Northern Hemisphere. It's just hot. It's training season. So mine is mountaineering related, which is great because that's what this podcast focuses on.
Come on, we cover it all. Skiing, rock climbing. Next episode's guest is Connor Herson. It was so much fun. But yeah, let's go. Mountains. What do you got?
It feels very on brand. It's David Gottler and team. I actually forget the other two people's names. Their summit of the Rupal Face on Nanga Parbat. And David in particular, because I think it's his fifth attempt over the years.
Yeah.
2 times he tried in winter. I think he's just an example of a really, really core individual in the sport of alpinism. And he's actually a great example of someone who's kind of like tried it all, failed a lot. He fails a lot. So he's really good at failing and he's like makes really good decisions. And then he pulled it off. And I'm just really excited for him. He's a friend of ours. He also paraglided off the summit and was down in 30 minutes. And I think his other 2 team members did the first ski descent. It took him 3 days. So that's also something crazy to think about when it comes to like the progression of the sport and where it's headed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that detail we got from David when we congratulated him and we're writing about it, that it took his partners 3 days or almost 3 days to ski down it, which is like an epic accomplishment to ski the Rupel face, one of the great faces in the world. Probably, I'm going to make it up. Let's say 10,000 vertical feet. Average angle, probably in the low 40 degrees. The ski descent must have been epic. But the fact that David was able to fly off, like you said, in good conditions, it seems like he got down in, like under an hour possibly. And this tool that we're talking more and more about of paragliding in the high mountains as a way to descend from difficult objectives, there is a lot of risk in paragliding. We've obviously done our episodes with Topo about his injury that he got paragliding. But on the other side of that coin, it's hard to imagine that an hour-long flight, if the conditions were good, weren't far safer than multiple more days spent on the Rupel face, exposed to icefall, rockfall, avalanche conditions, and obviously the descent itself, whether it's on skis or down climbing. But what a great news item. I mean, just a massive success. Congratulations to David and the team. For your podcasting career as a host, you would look up those details and have
I got the names
ready?
I already have them. Tiffen Duperrier and Boris Langenstein. So There you go. They skied it.
Tiffen, Boris, and David, congratulations. And then the other fun piece about this news item is just this was kind of the opening up of the Pakistan summer 8,000 meter peak season. Nanga Parbat is always summited earlier than K2 and Broad Peak and the Gasherbums. And that's exactly what happened this year. These guys summited on the Rupel face, and then we're also seeing summits on the normal route now. So that's a great data point. Those summits happen. But we're also hearing a lot out of Pakistan that it's an incredibly warm and dry season with a lot of increased risk due to rockfall and drag glaciers, difficult climbing. My year in Pakistan when I did K2 in 2019 was a dry, hot year, and it was so scary. The degradation of the glaciers we were having to cross, and then how much daily rockfall and big, wet avalanches there were. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I'm so glad these guys are off safe. There was at least one fatality on the normal route of Nanga already this season. And I think we're going to have to see how things play out in the rest of the mountains. And I think there is a lot of conversation happening of whether the Pakistan season should actually be moving forward. If that's actually what is happening, that we need to be getting on these peaks before they kind of dry out and get really hot. So TBD how the season goes.
Great. What's yours?
Nothing. Emily's done talking about the mountains.
Well, I don't know how long we're supposed to go.
We're doing great.
I've never done the news before.
With 13 minutes in, Sam won't be angry at us if we go 15 to 20.
Okay, perfect.
My news item is kind of close to both of our hearts, as well as being, I think, big news. And of course, there's potential controversy in this one, but I think that's part of why it's interesting to talk about. We received, this is Tahoe local news, but as many of the listeners know, we live here in North Lake Tahoe. We ski at Palisades Tahoe, the resort that used to be called Squaw Valley. And that's also where Alpenglow Expeditions, my guide company's office, is based. And for the past, since I've moved here, so I moved here in 2008, 15, 16 years, Palisades has been trying to get permission to expand their base area village, to have more shops, more restaurants, and also more housing, both hotel type as well as condominium and homes. And it's been a long process and hard fought between people who believe that this resort has to develop in order to stay one of the best resorts in North America or in the world, versus people who feel like this beautiful Alpine Valley, which it is one of the most beautiful valleys in the United States, whether this valley should have any more development and all the potential challenges that development brings, like additional traffic and water usage and things like that. We could spend hours talking about the pluses and minuses, but the big news was after 15 years of lawsuits, or at least a decade of lawsuits that have been tying up the redevelopment since the development was originally approved by Placer County in the state of California, the people involved, the groups involved have finally come to an agreement. Palisades, now owned by Alterra, has agreed to reduce the footprint of the new village by 40% from what they were originally planning. And the groups that have been suing Alterra have agreed to drop all lawsuits and support the village development. What I liked about the story was, the bright spots and kind of like how our political system and how compromise works have been few and far between, it feels like, recently. And this was a story to me that people were incredibly passionate and for years, I would argue, not necessarily respectful of each other's perspectives or sides. So, I think there were times when executives based at Palisades weren't super respectful of locals' opinions. And I think there were times when the local groups that were suing Alterra were definitely not respectful of, the vision and the actual plan and kind of the facts of the redevelopment. And finally, both sides sat down and spent months in a room hammering out details, listening to each other, and agreeing that compromise was the only way to move forward. And I am just so happy to see that compromise and hope that now money and effort can go towards things like building new employee housing, which is a big part of this project, reducing car trips and travel and traffic, which is a part of this project, and building the most beautiful village we can have with amenities the locals will use, like rec center, as well as the tourists will use, instead of calling each other names. So I just want to say congratulations to everyone who was involved in coming to a compromise and an agreement that is workable, both from the financial side of a for-profit corporation and from the conservation side of locals and people that love this place so much.
Awesome. Have you talked to anyone in the community and seen what the vibe is? Are they excited? Is everyone excited? Is this a win overall?
Heck no. Because a 40% reduction of size is still 60%, larger than it is today. 800 new bedrooms, I think. 80% more, retail space and restaurants and a store. And so it is real impact on this mountain environment. And there is a lot of fear around additional car traffic and employee needs that will cause. So, for sure, there are people who wish that the development had stayed at zero. And I think on the other side, of course, I'm sure there are people involved in Alterra that wish it was the original side because they ran the financial numbers and that was perhaps what it took to be profitable or profitable at the level they hoped it would be. And it's what they believed would make a vibrant community here year round instead of only during busy weekends. So my guess is nobody's happy, but hopefully everyone's satisfied that this is workable. And the conversations I've had amongst friends from both sides of the issue, overall are at least it's not what it was in either direction, which was none or everything. And
it's a compromise.
It's a compromise. And I mean, my perspective because you have to listen to me way more than anyone else. But I believe mountain towns do need to change. And I believe we need to not make these places so gatekeepery that no one new can come. And that means growth will continue. And so I do believe responsible growth is the best path, not keeping things how they were, how I remember them when I came here for the first time 20 years ago, or when I moved here 17 years ago. And so I'm a believer in this path forward.
Absolutely.
Have you been getting any vibes, or is this close to your heart? I mean, we're literally looking at the parking lots right now, which will be replaced by buildings.
No, I haven't talked to anyone about it except for you. That's why I asked you what the vibe was, because you're the one that told me about it. I don't look at my social media anymore very much, so I haven't seen anything about it or read anything about it. So you were the first one that I talked to about it.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, I mean, you grew up in Boulder, Colorado, which many people, when you were a child 30 plus years ago, probably people considered it a mountain town. And today people consider it a city. It's
Yeah, it's a
experienced just
city.
incredible, explosive growth, movement of tech firms in, workers, massive amounts of traffic, and huge amounts of money. What's your vibe of that place that you love so much? Like,
I went back there for the first time in many, many years just recently, and I got to spend a week in my old neighborhood, a little suburb of Gun Barrel. And that used to be like the affordable, I mean, it still is. That's the affordable place to live if you can't live in Boulder proper. But basically, all of my friends who used to live in Boulder or rent in Boulder had since bought homes in Gun Barrel and moved there. And I was really pleasantly surprised to see the growth and development, particularly in that little suburb. There was a climbing gym, there were cool coffee shops, there was nice restaurants. It used to just be kind of a place where nothing was going on and pretty boring. And I was really excited to see this growth and this expansion, sort of like an offshoot of Boulder. I thought it was awesome. I actually never even went into Boulder proper. I just stayed in Gun Barrel and had a great time. And I think the people there are really excited about that sort of development. But maybe it's more because Boulder was already pretty big and already pretty expensive. And this is just, yeah, it was making it affordable for people like them to still live there. So yeah, the vibe was really good. I had a great visit.
yeah, excellent. I'm sure people complain about house prices going up and traffic becoming more of an issue and things like that. But I would hope that Boulder also in this growth, also considered things like trails and green space and environmental impacts. And those are things that I'm excited are absolutely part of the plan here. I'm someone who actually, I mean, you are as well, but I actually lived in Olympic Valley in Palisades for many years, and I'm deeply passionate about this place. And I, as someone who's lived here as well as been a tourist here, like really believe in this idea that a bit of growth, kind of what you're describing in Gun Barrel, will be really positive. Like right now, in off seasons or on any weekday evening, everything's closed by 7 p.m. Well, if we have 1,000 more people staying in the valley or 2,000 more people staying in the valley instead of leaving and driving their cars to Taos City or Truckee at night, I think that's going to add to a more vibrant kind of restaurant scene and, being able to have a real, like I said, market of some sort for being able to buy groceries and things like that. So I think the additional growth, especially since it's not impacting green spaces, it's going to be built in old parking lots with parking being brought underground or down to the base of the valley by the 7-Eleven. I think the plans are pretty exciting. I want to see additional vibrancy in this place and an ability for people to stay instead of driving in and out each day.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's exciting for locals as well as tourists. So we should be psyched.
Knock on wood. And meanwhile, I want people to focus all that energy they've been putting into like no more growth into like, how do we fix the transportation issue and the affordable housing issue? These are the two issues that will actually make locals' lives better, not shutting the doors to no more people.
Yeah, it's just unrealistic for one. It's just not the real world to think that no growth can happen. It just has to. So it should be thoughtful.
Absolutely. Well, congrats to Palisades and all the stakeholders involved. And even though it means we're going to be looking at construction cranes for the next few years out of the windows of this condo, and I hope we can be involved to, continue to lend a direction that's really positive to this place in some tiny way, even if it's just in conversations. Emily, any thoughts on our guest, Billi Bierling?
I haven't talked to Billi in years. I'm excited to hear the interview.
Absolutely. It was a good one, recorded before Sam went on paternity leave. So have a listen. And thanks for joining for the news and podcast co-hosting. This is going to be fun.
You're welcome.
Welcome back to the Duffel Shuffle Podcast. I'm so excited for this one today. I'm lucky enough to have Billi Bierling here with us on the podcast. And I was trying to remember before we hopped on, like, when we first met and what I was going to say about Billi. But a couple of things quickly come to mind. I mean, first of all, Billi's been around since kind of the beginning of my 8,000 meter climbing career. My first season on Everest in 2009 with Himalayan Experience. Billi, you were there, you were climbing. And I think I remember a few things. I think you were also working for the UN at the time. We'll talk a little bit about your background, but I'm like, how is she like a journalist working in like war areas and climbing big mountains? Like all I've done is climb mountains to try to get here, and Billi's here. So that's the first thing I remember was I feel like you juggle a lot of remarkable things. And then the second thing, now knowing you for, 15, we're getting up there like towards 2 decades, I've just been impressed consistently. Billi is out there climbing just because of a pure passion for it, not for a profession. As far as I know, you don't make a living from your climbing, and yet you just keep going to mountains, both that I've heard of before and mountains that I haven't heard of before. You've summited quite a few 8,000 meter peaks now, a couple without supplemental oxygen, which, is just a remarkable feat. 3 of them, we'll talk about it. And if there is a single fact I need to know about the Himalaya, about who's climbed what, who's skied what, just your journalistic integrity and knowledge from decades on the mountains just comes through. And I always know I'm going to get like probably good truth facts. And I'm also going to get like very educated opinions if I'm trying to figure out what's going on there. So Billi, we're just so excited to have you with us to talk Himalaya and your path and all you've done there.
Oh, I'm so glad to be on the Duffel Shuffle. And, I'm feeling really touched and flattered by your intro, Adrian. And yes, 2009, you still had a ponytail. I remember that. There was this
that is something a lot of our listeners probably do not know. So thanks for bringing that up, Billi.
We can get a photo in the show notes for sure.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, there are some good ones out there. It's true. I was probably wearing, socks with Tivas or Chacos, a lot of rings maybe, and a ponytail. Things have changed, Sam. You might not have worked with me back then.
And
I've seen the photos.
Adrian always had very cool music. There was always music in his tent, and it was always cool music. And I thought, I've got to write it down.
That's also fun to hear because my team at Alpenglow Expeditions today would be horrified to hear that. They don't let me near the speakers anymore in the office or anything like that. So, Billi, of course, we want to talk a little bit about like this year's season. We've been doing a lot of podcasts about kind of like how things have been changing, what we saw this year, what we learned from this year. So we do want to get there, but I think it would be really interesting. There are so many people listening to this podcast striving to get to the big mountains. So let's rewind all the way back. Like, when did you start climbing? Where did you grow up in a climbing family? And how did you make your way to the Himalaya?
Right. I'll try and keep it short. So I grew up in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, it's a typical German mouthful, and I'm in the Bavarian Alps. And everybody thinks, of course, Billi is a mountaineer because she grew up in the mountains, and I had nothing to do with the mountains. So I could just carry you to my window now and show you my view. So we are here in Garmisch, and, our highest mountain is 2,900 meters, but we're enclosed by the mountains. And I would like to think that I'm a little bit of a free spirit. And, when I was a teenager, I needed to get out. These mountains, they were just boxing me in. And I remember we used to have this saying, get rid of the mountains. We want a clear view of the Mediterranean. No. So I was the leader in this because I had to go hiking with my parents, and hiking is so boring. And, especially when you're 12 and 13, you're hiking. And then my mother, I think when I was 16, I just hung out with my friends. I was always skiing, but piste skiing, hanging out with my friends in the mountains, drinking and partying and not really skiing that much. And then my mother said, gosh, and I wish you a man who loves the mountains. And my answer was, Mum, I wouldn't look at him with my backside. And then, as it happens, I moved to the UK and I met Mike. I don't know whether you ever met Mike, Adrian, Mike Grocott, who is now, he's quite well known as a high altitude medic. Monica knows him. He's done a lot of research. So I met Mike, and Mike had just started climbing. So I started rock climbing in the UK which is very different from rock climbing here in Europe or Germany because you have to put in your own gear.
Right.
And I really enjoyed that. And then, fast forward 1998, Mike had planned this big trip to Nepal with a few friends, climbing a couple of 6,000 meter peaks. And I just thought, well, I want to come. And I didn't have any experience. And I went out and I bought my crampons. And I had nothing, I had to buy everything.
Yeah.
And then we spent 3 months in Nepal and we went in through the Rualing. My first 6,000 there was Pachamo, on the Tassi Lhotse.
Of course.
We did, the classic Island Peak, Mirror Peak. And when I was writing my book, I went back through my diary because I always say, I fell in love in Nepal, with Nepal in 98 and I love the climbing, and I read the diary and I just thought, oh my God, there were so many moments when I hated it, I was like, it's awful. But anyway, and then Mike and I actually afterwards, we went to South America for 3 months and we climbed in Ecuador and Peru and Bolivia, and then Nepal just touched my heart. And then Mike and I went back every year. And in 2001, we were attempting our first 7,000 meter peak, which was Lhotse. And, the classic, we arrive in Kathmandu at the Hammer Hotel, we drop our bags and the phone rings. And the guy at the reception said, Dr. Grocott, there is a phone call for you. And then Mike picked up the phone and it was Liz Hawley, who we go into her later. And anyway, so that's how I learned about the Himalaya, about Miss Hawley. Mike was in awe because he knew who Miss Hawley was. I didn't know. And then, as it happened, and then I just, I started working with the Himalayan Database and then I climbed big mountains. That's how it goes.
There are a lot of steps skipped over there, but I kind of love that.
But I don't want to take your questions.
Exactly. It's fun for two reasons hearing that. One, you essentially just described kind of like Alpenglows, give our little Alpenglow Expeditions plug, like the perfect path, right? Like you had this idea, you went to Nepal, you kind of got a taste, you did some trekking, a first peak, and then you were like, South America is where you went to build your experience in 6,000 meter peaks before going back to a 7,000 meter peak. And, that's kind of exactly what I grew up in as well. Amazingly, I went to Nepal in 97 for my first time and did the Annapurna circuit trek and climbed one 6,000 meter peak called Chulu East, probably very similar to kind of like the trip you described. I wasn't working yet at that point. I was right out of university, and that was kind of my first big trip to Asia that just blew my mind. And then obviously I came back to then guide in South America for a number of years before getting back to the Himalaya, starting to do 7,000 meter peaks and eventually 8,000 meter peaks. So it's fun hearing some of those like similarities. We were probably like on very similar paths, but I didn't cross paths in those early years.
You're the much better climber. I'm a client, and I couldn't go anywhere without a fixed rope. So, but
that's interesting. I do remember. Of course, you were a client, quote unquote, on the Himalayan experience trips, but you were really experienced and capable and confident client that spent a lot more time probably in guides meetings than, wondering what was going to happen the next day. But did you ever sort of like, what is that balance for you? Have you done quite a bit of climbing on smaller mountains on your own with friends? obviously with Mike, you were doing things.
Yes, so Mike and I, then we did a lot of rock climbing, and I was never a good rock climber. And now, I haven't really rock climbed for years, but we'd go to the Dolomites, and we'd always go. We went to South Africa. There is this climbing area just outside Joburg called Waterfall Boven. And
I know.
Have you been there?
I haven't been, but I've heard of it, of course.
Yeah, so we traveled a lot for climbing. But that's the great thing. But then you climb and you do other things. And then after Mike and I split up in 2002, I then moved to Switzerland. I was working as a journalist there, as a radio journalist. And then, I sort of stopped rock climbing because I lost my climbing partner. I lost my partner for life, but I also lost my climbing partner. And then I have actually done more climbing and mountaineering in the Himalaya than I've done here in Garmisch. I know mountains. The Zugspitze in Germany is the highest mountain, and it's 2,900 meters. It's like my training mountain. But otherwise, when I'm here, I also try and spend some time with my mom. I've done a few 4,000ers in the Swiss Alps, but most of my sort of glacier travel, high altitude stuff, I've really, I've done in Nepal. And here, I mean, like you, I love trail running. I mean, that's like also my new thing, a tiny little rucksack. And, I was in Mustang a couple of months ago, and I also enjoy that now. So I have both. I mean, I live here in the mountains and I spend almost every day in the mountains, but a lot of running. But the high altitude stuff, I've done most of it in Nepal.
And Billi, it sounds like your first trip to Nepal was really pivotal in that you did some climbing, but really you fell in love with the area. And I'm sure that is the people and the culture and the adventure. Would you say that your passion is climbing or your passion is adventure and climbing is just your way to get that?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think it's probably more, my passion is, I think it's more adventure. So, I love adventures. I love being on expedition. I don't understand the people who want to go and climb Everest in a week. Back in the days, we were at base camp for 7 weeks. I mean, I can see the advantages of not being as long so high. I mean, for example, Makalu, Adrian. I mean, you were in Makalu in 2012, I think.
Yep.
I was in 12 and then in 14 again. ABC is 5,700 meters.
So high.
And you don't really recover. But I love being on expedition. But as I say, I love going, running in Mustang. I think for me, it sounds so pathetic, but I think it's really the journey. And when I get to the top, it's always, I'm always surprised when I get there, and it's like the bonus, but it's also with the humanitarian work, I'm always intrigued, where do I go? And oh my God, when people say, oh, you're going to a war zone or you're going to a refugee camp and doesn't this upset you? And I just say, no, if it upset me, I'd be doing the wrong job. So I think it's more the adventure, but and also the physical exhaustion, what you do physically. I've run 100K trail run and I was tired, but the fatigue, the exhaustion you get after coming down from an 8,000 meter peak, I don't think you get anywhere else in the world. Maybe an Ironman, I don't know.
No, I was about to say no way, but I haven't done one, so I should be very careful. But, one of the things I always think about is how different, the big mountains, just like you're describing, you're putting day after day after day together in a way that, let's say in an Ironman, you don't do, or a marathon. Like you put one epic day together, just like we go and do big day missions in the Alps or the Sierra. But I think there is something different about the deep fatigue, both physically, but also mentally, emotionally, to day after day after day. That grind of expeditions that you actually thrive on, but can be very challenging.
Yeah. No. I really enjoyed, and also base camp life. I mean, I was at base camp this year for 5 days, and I don't know. I love being on expedition. I get up and somebody brings me a cup of tea, and then I get the best breakfast ever. And I don't think I ever eat as well as I do on expedition. When I used to go on expedition with Adrian, he always brought these great things. This is a bit of advertising for Trader Joe's. These amazing nuts. Oh, love it.
We should be sponsored by Trader Joe's. We still bring just, duffel bags full of Trader Joe's snacks. Yeah. And they're just those little creature comforts, right? But when was the last time you were on an expedition that was, let's say, more than a month long? Because it really is changing. It's harder to do today. But when was the last time you were on a long one?
Well, in 19, I climbed Broad Peak. So that was about 4 weeks. And in 20, oh my God, when was it? 21 or 22, I climbed Putahionchuli, which is also called Dalagiri 7. Right. It's 7,129 meters. And I did that with a few friends, Gelinde Kaltenbrunner being one of them.
Amazing.
And she's become one of my best friends, really, and it was great.
And for the audience, was Gelinde the first woman to climb all 14 without supplemental oxygen? Without supplemental oxygen.
Yes.
Just incredible. I mean, I remember those early years as I was coming into the sport, watching Gelinde, just work through peak by peak and seemed to be having so much fun while also just being so doggedly strong. It was amazing to see and really inspired me.
And she still is. I mean, Gelinde, I saw her yesterday, actually. So she's in Austria. So she's, she's done the 8,000er. She's not going to go back to the 8,000er. She doesn't need to do new routes or whatever, but she will still, she'll always be in the mountains. And in 21 or 22, we went to Puttainujuli. And again, it's amazing. And that is, also for Alpenglow. I mean, when you walk into base camp with Galinde, you go so slowly. I mean, Adrian, oh my God. But I have never been as well acclimatized as I was on that trip, because and then up on the mountain, I mean, Galinde summited at 1, I summited at 5, and she, you watch this woman. I mean, she's now also, she's 55 now. You watch her, and I think she has a special connection to the mountain. The way, no Sherpa can keep up, and she breaks trail, off she goes. Amazing. So I feel very lucky, and she's just a wonderful person. And it was a really great trip because it was just with friends, and there was, Puta is a great 7,000 meter peak. It's in Dolpo. And, you trek, you have to cross like 3 mountain ridges. And I love it. I just love being out there.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good little tidbit for inspired climbers, like starting slow. So many times, even in Ecuador, on the small, 6,000 meter peaks, people are doing their acclimatization at 14,000 feet and they're just running. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure you feel good here, but here's not the time to prove yourself. Here's the time to go slow and recover and, get the proper acclimatization. And that's, it goes all the way to the big mountains. Start slow and finish strong.
Absolutely. But Adrian, you guys, the worst. And I remember when I climbed Everest in 2009. See, I'm a person, I have to move all the time. And I remember, we were acclimatized on the 8th of May. And then Russell said, okay, Russell Bryce was our expedition leader. And, you mentioned his name many times in the podcast.
Yeah.
And Russell said, okay, good summit day on the 21st of May. And I just thought, it's the 8th of May now. What am I going to do? Sit around. So I started running down to Gorakshep every other day. And then at one point, Russell took me on the side and said, Billy, I have no doubt that you'll make it to the top of Mount Everest. But if you carry on doing this, you probably won't. And I think that is something I have really learned on expedition, that actually sitting down is good for you. And Russell, I actually think he said the magic word. He said, Billy, you know what? When you sit down, your body is working hard. And I said, oh, really? He said, yes. I said, great. I never moved again after that.
Yeah, but your whiskey intake probably went up. That's
famous house.
You just gave away your hidden talent, and that is your memory. I can tell is like phenomenal. You just named 2 dates from 2009. And maybe if you had only climbed one mountain in your life, those dates would be memorable, but you've climbed many mountains and you still named the 8th of May and the 21st of May like it was just, casual. Is your memory for dates and details like that, does it exist for everything in life, or is climbing something that really pulls these special memories out for you?
Well, I wish to say that I have this special memory, but 21st of May, I just remember because it was my Everest day. But, ask me what date I summited Cho Oyu. Do you remember, Adrian? I actually don't.
No, I have no idea.
And the 8th of May, another funny, 8th of May, as you may know, is Liberation Day, or the Russians call it Liberation Day. It was the end of the Second World War. And I remember because Alex Abramov, who is a Russian, every year on Everest, there's a big
party. Oh my God.
Liberation Day. And I was invited to that party. And I felt really funny because I'm German, And that's why, I do have a very good reason why I do remember those 2 dates.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But that said, you are, the details. You're, basically the, chronicler and detail keeper of Mount Everest and Nepal and the Himalaya in general. Is that a passion for you as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I have another story right away, passion. So just to go back, so the Himalayan Database was basically set up by chance by Elizabeth Hawley, who was born in Chicago in 1923. And she came through Nepal as a young woman and stayed there because she thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see how Nepal opens to the West? Because in the 50s, was, the Chinese went into Tibet, and Tibet, which was open, closed, and Nepal opened its borders. And Liz Hawley thought, I want to see how this country will approach the West, and got herself a job as a journalist. And then she covered the first American Everest expedition in 1963. So she was the only Western journalist in country. And, she got all the scoops. And then she was fascinated. I mean, she was fascinated by the people. And as Adrian knows, Liz Hawley never climbed a mountain. She never wore a pair of crampons. She had never even went to base camp. She got as far as Tangbachi, but she was fascinated by the people. And then she carried on, and then the next expedition came. And how did she know who's arriving? She would drive her Beetle, her baby blue Beetle, to the airport, because back in the 60s, there were 2 international flights a week.
Right.
And she would pick them out, big mountaineering boots, come over here. She summoned them over, said, tell me, where are you going? Which mountain are you climbing? Okay. And get in touch when you get back. And if you knew Miss Hawley, of course you would get in touch when you got back, because you'd be so scared if you didn't. So that's how this whole Himalayan database started. And then, a Manaslu expedition came. And then I don't know when she decided that she would collect all data for all expedition peaks in Nepal. So we cover the expedition peaks, not in Pakistan. So we don't do K2, we don't do Broad Peak, but all expedition peaks in Nepal, and there are 450. Now, passion. So when Liz Hawley, so I started working for her in 2004. And in 2016, Liz Hawley was then 91, had an interview with Garrett Madison, who's also been on your show. And he had just climbed Berg Peak, with Bill Berg. Bill Berg was the oldest, back in the days, the oldest American on Everest. And Miss Hawley did the interview, and during the interview, her mind went blank. Maybe for 30 seconds, maybe for a minute, I don't know. She finished the interview. Afterwards, she rang me up. She said, can you come here now? And as usual, I would drop everything and go.
Which is what everybody does if Miss Hawley used to call. Like, if you were summoned, you dropped I could be in the middle of a guides meeting with my clients, just met them all at the airport. It's like, I got to go. Like, there's no choice if Miss Hawley rings.
Absolutely. And I did that every day, Adrian, with her.
For years.
Oh, God, for years. So anyway, and then Miss Hawley said to me, matter of fact as she was, she said, I've just done an interview. My mind went blank. I can't do this anymore. Now you do it. Wow. And I looked at her, I said, okay. And then I asked her the question. I said, Miss Hawley, how does it feel giving something up you were so passionate about? She looked at me. Passionate? How can you possibly be passionate about a database? She said, I've never been passionate about anything in my life. And I said, hey. And she said, well, when I start something, I finish it. And now you can continue. So that was just the key word. And I was just, absolutely gobsmacked. And she never looked back. It was so interesting. So she was alive for another 2 years. And I would, to keep her entertained. I mean, I'd go and see her every day. We had a chat, and that was actually my most precious time, because we stopped being boss and assistant. We became like mother and daughter. And I would ask her all the questions I would never, ever have dared to ask her before. And that was very precious. And then every once in a while, I would take expeditions to her house, but she wasn't really interested anymore. She stopped it, and that was it.
She truly moved on. She knew when it was time.
Yeah. And now to answer your question, sorry, I am a passionate person. I do have a passion for it. I don't get a penny paid for it. I don't want any money for it, because what I have gained, which was never my intention, but what I have gotten from the Himalayan database, I mean, no money in the world can can buy. And just getting to know Miss Hawley so well that she actually once called me her best friend, Adrian. I mean,
I believe it.
Yes. So,
even though you were intimidated, the respect was clearly there, and the friendship and the love and that family. It was just Miss Hawley, from the times I spent with her. She just never really, perhaps with the British upbringing or who knows what else. Oh no, she was American, but
she
had this very British sense of no emotion. Like when she was done with a conversation, with anything else. There were no niceties ever.
No. But the thing is, she was who she was. And I always took it very personally, which was silly because, I remember the day I told Miss Hawley that I was going to go and climb Everest, because Miss Hawley wanted to have me in Kathmandu all the time because that's where we met teams. That's where I had to do the interviews. And I remember I had sleepless nights. How I'm going to tell Miss Hawley that I'm going to be away. So I finally, got all my, courage and went to her house. And I said, Miss Hawley, I think it was a week before we left, Adrian, I'm going to go and climb Everest, or attempt. And she was at her keyboard, she picked up her keyboard and her keyboard went into my direction. And she shouted, for God's sake, woman, can't you sit still? And she threw me out of the house. She was so upset. Okay. And I was so upset. And in the afternoon, my phone rings and it was Liz Hawley. And she said, oh, there was a Spanish expedition going to Manaslu. They're in the whatever hotel. Can you go and see them? And I said, oh, Miss Hawley, I thought you just fired me. And then she said, fired you? I'd never fire you. You are very useful, she said. Anyway. Go on.
And
Sorry.
I wonder if inside there was also Miss Hawley telling you to sit still, also looking at your life. And maybe she also had thoughts like, oh, Billi could, like, if she stayed put for a few minutes, how good would that be for her? Like she was giving her little piece of advice in her own way.
She gave me lots of advice. But just to finish this, so as you did, I dropped everything. I remember I had dinner with Uli Steck, who was, a very famous Swiss climber, for those who never knew, who don't know who Uli was, who sadly died in 2017. And I was in the middle of having dinner. Miss Hawley rang and I said, Uli, sorry, I've got to go. And then at one point, I think it was in 2012 or 13, she rang me at 5 o'clock, said, can you come here now? And I just said, no, Miss Hawley, I can't. I'm coming tomorrow morning at 9. And she just said, okay. And that was the day she started to respect me, because I put my foot down. And she didn't dominate me. I allowed her to dominate.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Wow.
I do miss her.
Absolutely. I can imagine, what a force she was in your life. Today's podcast is brought to you by Alpenglow Expeditions, a Tahoe-based guide company with an international reputation. In its 20th year of operations, Alpenglow leads the highest quality expeditions in some of the world's greatest mountain ranges, from California's High Sierra to the rugged Himalaya. Alpenglow runs more than 40 international expeditions per year, as well as offering a full menu of guided ski and climbing courses throughout California. Join us and experience the Alpenglow difference. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Himalayan Database, but for people who are interested in Miss Hawley's story, what are the best ways to learn more about her? Is it your book? Is it,
Well, I wrote a book, and I think it's called, it's at the moment, it's only in German. It's called I Have a Bike in Kathmandu. My sister seems to think that had I had Everest in the title, it probably would have sold better. I've sold 4,000 copies, which is fine.
Yeah.
And it's not a mountaineering book. I don't talk about my climbs, because my climbs, I'm a client. I pull myself up a fixed rope. It's not that interesting. But I think I tell a lot of stories, like the little stories I told you, about Miss Hawley. And I think it's very open and honest about Miss Hawley, but also with the greatest respect. And people who've read my book, they said, Billi, she was so tough with you, but the way you describe it is also really affectionate. So I don't, it's, yeah. And then there's a book It's called I'll Call You in Kathmandu by Bernadette MacDonald. I don't know whether you ever read it. I think they now renamed it to The Keeper of the Mountains.
All right.
And that was published in 2004.
Yeah, a
and
long time ago.
Very good. But yeah, if I ever get around to finding an American or English speaking publisher, I will get on and translate the book myself, and then hopefully you can read it.
Let's make that happen. Any listeners with little publishing houses? Let's make that happen. Because I haven't read your book yet. I had a bike in Kathmandu. I love it.
Yeah, I love that title, Billy, and I have my own interpretation knowing a bit about you, but where did that kind of come up? How did you come up with that title?
Because I think, Greg, IMG Greg, every time he sends me an email, he says, "Oh, Billy, are you still riding your bike around Kathmandu?" When I first arrived in Kathmandu in 2004, when I started working for Liz Hawley, and she gave me instructions that I had to buy a clipboard and I had to buy a map of Kathmandu and memorize all hotels in Kathmandu because that's where we meet the teams. The very first thing I did before I bought the map and the clipboard, I bought a bicycle. Because for me, I'm not bicycle for me is the best mean of transport. And I bought it 21 years ago, and I still have that very bike. And that bike, I don't have many possessions that are very close to my heart, but the bicycle is. And I bought it that night when I arrived, and through Kathmandu traffic, zack, 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 you're there. And sometimes I would meet Miss Hawley somewhere. We would leave her house at the same time. She had her baby Blue Beetle and a driver, and I was on my bike. I'd wait for her for 15 minutes.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, Kathmandu traffic is, for me, the bicycle, wherever I go and live. I mean, I mentioned it before. I also work for the UN and humanitarian aid. I lived in Islamabad. I lived in Kiev. I lived in Jerusalem. I bring my bicycle. And I remember in Islamabad, it was a big thing because the UN didn't like me riding a bike. But there were no regulations against riding a bike because not many UN people come and ride a bike. And I remember my boss, who's also now a very good friend, I remember I once said, "Oh, Manuel, shit, UNDSS, it's the safety and security people. They saw me riding my bike." And I said, "Oh, Billy, don't worry about it." I get an email from them once a week saying, "We advise you to advise Billy not to use her bike." And I said, "Well, you've never advised me." And he said, "Billy, I know if I do, you will leave." So I just delete the email. So for me, the bicycle is freedom. And that's why, when we wrote the book, just thought, title. And somebody came up with it and I really liked it. But the book is very difficult to place for the bookshop. I mean, it's like me. I don't fit in a box. People say, "Well, you're German, but you live in Switzerland and you're in Nepal and you work for I don't fit in a box." And my book, where does it go? Well, it's not a bicycle book. Is it a mountaineering book? I don't know. But I have seen my book next to Nim's book, so.
Well, now you know where it's placed.
So that's the mountaineering.
And Billy, so you mentioned you live in Switzerland and you spend a lot of time in Kathmandu. What does that look like in a year? Do you have a certain amount of time that you're in Kathmandu each year, or does it vary based on each, season?
Yeah. So I normally leave. So I'm based in Germany, but I also have a Swiss base. I have also a Swiss passport, and I have Nepal. So I usually leave here at the end of March, now beginning of April, because, when Adrian and I climbed Everest in 2009, people would start at the end of March. Now people start in mid-April, So I leave here around mid-April and I come back around the 5th or 6th of June. And then in the autumn season, I normally leave. I used to leave at the end of August, but because of the Manaslu expeditions and, because a lot of Manaslu expeditions go in the autumn, but because it's not that we don't archive them anymore, but I don't strive to interview them anymore. I get for the commercial 8,000th commercial routes, I get the data from the ministry. So now I leave. My mom's birthday is on the 23rd of September, and I normally leave after that. And then I come back end of November. So I have about 5 months in Nepal.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And do you have an apartment in Kathmandu and the bike stays in the apartment?
Absolutely. And I have another story. Can I tell you about the bike? I have an apartment and I share it with a friend of mine from the UK, and he is there during the season, and Priti, who's Nepali, and myself. And a couple of years ago, I get a phone call from Priti, and apparently somebody had broken into our apartment, which is quite interesting because crime was never a big issue in Nepal. But now, when did you last go to Kathmandu, Adrian?
I was in Kathmandu. That's a good question. About a year and a half ago, I brought our son Arrow trekking for his 1 year birthday. We trekked to Lhotse and spent a few days with Dorje Sonam and all of our Sherpa friends. And it was incredible. Climbed Pakal Day, just had a trip that perhaps I had started to become a bit jaded. Like I only trekked in Nepal in order to get to a mountain to do a job or to climb something that was a big goal. And this was the exact opposite of that. And I just loved every minute. I remembered all the reasons I fell in love with Nepal in 97, much like you described. It was really special.
Yeah. So, but and back in the days, I sound like Russell, there were only the Marutis on the streets. And now, private money has skyrocketed. I mean, they drive the big SUVs in Kathmandu and they have an import tax of more than 200%. So you've got to figure it out how much one of these cars is. So, more like in South America, the gap, between rich and poor has widened. So crime has increased. So somebody broke into our apartment. There is nothing in our apartment you can steal apart from my climbing gear, but the people wouldn't know it. And we had 3 bicycles in the yard, and they took 2 and they left mine.
Why? It's because it was 21 years old.
Exactly.
Like, we don't want that piece of junk.
Oh, I felt so sorry for my friends, but they really left my bike. And now I put it up on the roof and I lock it. I mean, I think my bike, it's so old, but hey, I think I had over the last 21 years, and I cycled from Lhasa to Kathmandu.
I know you did.
On it in 2005. It was still a dirt road. I didn't have one puncture.
Wow. I mean, I feel like now hearing these stories and remembering this, your bike to you has become iconic in the same way that Ms. Hawley's VW Beetle became to her. Like, if you did show up in a meeting at one of our hotels without your bike, we'd be like, what happened to Billy? Like, that it would be shocking. I mean, I just have so many memories of you joining us for dinners or, coming to various meetings, like always on that bike, no matter where we were in the
Hyatt Hotel, which is so far out, and I would cycle there, be it snow or rain or whatever. Of course, it's my freedom. It's my total freedom. And also in Islamabad, I mean, when I was working for the UN, people weren't driving themselves. They had drivers. So if I needed to go somewhere, I mean, I can get on my bicycle. And of course, I wouldn't cycle in shorts. I mean, I would be properly dressed. But so
I can imagine Islamabad. I mean, even the early years in Nepal, I remember it was still it felt rare to have like a tall foreign woman raging through the traffic in Kathmandu. It stood out, right? Like, you were suddenly a figure. Everyone knew where you were. Like, we could call around and be like, oh, Billy was last seen here, right? Like, you were noticeable.
On a bicycle. Yes, exactly.
And so, going back to the database, obviously, we've been talking on this podcast a lot about change. And, you mentioned recently you're no longer tracking kind of the big commercial expeditions, doing whatever, let's say, the standard routes and the standard form of climbing. Like, what do you see? I'm sure there is a mission statement, but what is the purpose of the database? What is the goal? What is the mission? Why keep doing it? 20 years from now, what do you hope people are getting from the database?
Yeah. I mean, I think when Miss Hawley first started, it was a hobby. And then, of course, people were still climbing new routes, new mountains. And I mean, if you do look at the database, there's a really detailed, account of what they've done and the routes. And so, and then, of course, the 8,000 meter peaks came and there were maybe 3 people on Makalu in 1975. But, now there are 60 people on Makalu. I mean, the same on Kanchenjunga and Annapurna. So there's so many people on the 8,000ers and Amadablam. So that has really changed. So the purpose of the database, I think, for Liz Hawley was really to archive or record these new ventures, the new routes, and also then for people like you, you just think, oh, I'd like to do, whatever. To Lhotse has this route being done, and you go to the database and you see that. Whereas, and then when I started working for Hawley, of course, 2004, the commercialization was, it was increasing and increasing, but we still could speak to the expedition leaders, because when, you and I were there, you had like IMG and you had Himex and you had Alpine Ascents. You had one expedition leader, 10 clients, 15 Sherpa. And then I would meet with Russell or with Adrian, and Russell or Adrian would give me the account of everyone. And I'd say, okay, how did John Smith go? Who was his Sherpa? Yada, yada, yada. Whereas then in 2012 or 2011, I think the Nepali companies, they sort of came out, 7 summit treks out of nowhere. And within a year, everybody went to 7 summit treks. And now they have up to 150 people on Everest alone. And 7 summit treks, they don't even know who's coming, who's going. People come to Kathmandu, they fly to base camp, or it's all so quick. You don't have the one expedition leader anyway. They still do exist, and I meet them, I mean, Adrian, you still need to fill in my form, by the way.
I owe you a form.
Absolutely.
Hey, I was co-expedition leader. That's Topo's job. I'm throwing him under the bus.
Okay. Anyway, and I, Miss Hawley was still doing it, but I would go to a hotel, like now it's the Aloft Hotel where they all stay, and I would sit down with one person, and then I would see the next person coming from Kanj, and I couldn't concentrate on an interview because I'd see all these people. And at one point I just thought we would need 100 people to do this properly. And at the end of the day, what do I ask? When did you get to Camp 1 and Camp 2 and Camp 3? When did you summit? And so they all go up the same route. And then I said to Miss Hawley, and I said this to her in 2016, I said, Miss Hawley, this is going crazy. And she said, well, if you want to save time, forget about Everest. It's a joke, and I just thought, okay. And then in 2000, and I think it was before COVID or after COVID, I decided, you know what? Those people who come down, and if you climbed Everest with 5 Sherpas and 100 bottles of oxygen, if you come down and ring me up and says, hey, I want to meet somebody from the Himalayan database, I'm the first people to go and see you, and I do the interview, but I won't seek you out. So who do I seek out? I seek out, I don't know, Nives Meroy and her husband Romano and Peter Hammer, 3 climbers in their 60s, did a new route on Kabru, which is next to Kanchenjunga. Huge.
So cool.
And I know them well. I don't have to chase them, but these people I chase, So new routes, new mountains. I want to sit down with these people and talk about it. And everything else, the commercial routes, commercial expeditions, I'd still try. I'd always speak to Mike Hamill. I'd always speak to Garrett. I'd speak to Lucas. I'd speak, to Adrian. Or we also have an online form, also to just get an idea of what's been happening on the mountain. But actually seeking out people, I really concentrate on new routes. And the purpose for that is, just, to keep on recording the, the pioneering stuff, if you may want to call it, and the numbers you'll still get because we get them from the ministry.
So you'll still get this overall big picture of the numbers, but then the things you're putting time into to tell the story, to get into like the actual details of more of these pioneering routes. We know in your history, you've climbed mountains with supplemental oxygen and without supplemental oxygen. Are no supplemental oxygen climbs still something that you think are unique or wild or difficult enough that you really try to capture all those?
Yes and no. So I take my hat off to anyone, also to you, Adrian, who climbs Everest without oxygen. Huge.
Sure.
It's
I do too. I take it off to every single one and the other 8,000 meter peaks. But go ahead. Keep going with your thoughts.
But, okay, Everest, the first 5, Makalu is, correct me if I'm wrong, 84, 85. And then
85 something.
Makalu is number 5, and then we drop to 82 Cho Oyu.
Totally different.
you're not going to believe this, to this very day, there are more ascents of Cho Oyu without supplemental oxygen than with.
I believe
Now,
it.
why is that? Because back in the days,
It was standard.
of course, Cho Oyu. I mean, hardly any. I mean, Manaslu, if you go to the database and check the ascents of Manaslu up until, let's say, 2005, 75% without supplemental oxygen. Now, 75% with. So the lower 8,000 meter peaks have traditionally been climbed without oxygen. And I do remember, I still see you and Emily skiing down towards me on Cho Oyu. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I remember I was, and you were so sweet. Billy, go without us.
Yeah,
This is
you were without
amazing.
oxygen.
And I still remember, I think I don't know whether you heard me. I said, yes, it's amazing. But the other 10 German women who climbed it before me also did it without oxygen. So
it's a great reminder.
Yes. Yeah. So I do. I mean, I really truly believe that. I mean, I tried Makalu without O's, and I would have loved to climb it without O's, but I just have to be honest to myself. I'm not strong enough, and so the lower ones. Yes, I mean, of course, I think it's good to climb without oxygen, but I really think the big 5 I do take, and especially Everest, and I mean. You mentioned Anja Blacher in your last podcast.
We definitely mispronounced her last name, but we did mention her.
Pronounce it again.
We mentioned her, but I love it. Like, we now get a significant amount of abuse for our podcast, and it usually comes straight to me through DMs and text messages and stuff like that. Like, it actually warms my heart. I mean, it makes me feel bad. I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name, Anna, but I loved it that Billy was just like, you butchered that. And I was like, we need to have you on the podcast. Say it again, Billy.
Okay, so she's not Anja Blacher, because Blacher, it sounds like a Slovenian pancake. I don't know why. Anja Blacher. But I loved it. I mean, I was running and I just heard you saying Anja Blacher, and I think I was laughing out loud. Very impressive. Anja, she's 35, and she's not like Galinde. She's not a mountaineer.
Sure.
And she doesn't claim to be. She just does it. Matter of fact is, she doesn't make a big announcement. She just goes. And I was in touch with Ming Maji when she was going up, and I was quite nervous because Anja is the first one to say, I didn't do it without Sherpa support, which is right, because she used the tents, she used the food. But on that day, she was up there on her own.
Alone.
No Sherpa carrying an extra bottle of oxygen. She was there on her own. And she would have climbed Lhotse as well. But then she had to leave because the icefall doctors, it's actually quite a funny story, because I don't think it's ever been done, Everest and Lhotse, within 2 days.
Without oxygen. Yeah.
There was a Polish guy last year, he did Lhotse Everest without O's. And I think that's doable. Anja, I'm sure, could have done it. So Anja took from the South Col to the summit 14 hours.
Yep.
Now, top alpinists like Uli Stick took 13 hours.
Yep.
David took 12 and a half.
Yep.
Anja did it in 14. I mean, amazing.
Really impressive.
She was down in no time. She rested, she packed her gear and went to Lhotse Camp 4. And then Ming Maji said to her, Anja, you've got to get up early. The icefall doctors are angry. They were angry because she was the last person on the mountain. You need to be down at lunchtime. So Anja was all raring to go. And at 8:30, she heard the radio crackle, Ming Maji saying, Anja, where are you? She was still sleeping. She said, Billy, I overslept.
Brutal. Very understandable, but brutal.
Brutal. And she would have done it. She's so... I really don't know how she does it, but she just goes. She's amazing. And I really like her. I think I take my hat off. So supplemental without Everest, without O's. And I do, yes, of course. I mean, but I still believe that the lower 8,000 meter peaks, they were all climbed without oxygen traditionally. So that doesn't blow my mind, I have to say.
Right.
And I do love it when people ask me, how many people have climbed Cho Oyu without Everest? And I said, well, actually more than with oxygen. And then people always
it just blows people's minds, right? No, it's a great thing to remember. So, I mean, you're sitting here with basically more knowledge than the vast majority of the history and of this progression. You just threw out a comment that, Ms. Hawley said Everest is a joke. We're talking about no oxygen. It used to be standard. Now it's not, even on these lower peaks. We're now seeing oxygen becoming very standard on 7,000 meter peaks. I don't know when you were last on Aconcagua, but there's major commercialized operators running Aconcagua with oxygen now. We're seeing Ama de Blanc with quite a bit of oxygen. We're seeing a lot of oxygen being put on a base camp or advanced base camp on the north side, so 6,100. Like, do you have opinions, or do you have opinions you're willing to share kind of about this progression of the sport? Is it the right direction because we're getting more people out there having these remarkable experiences in the tall mountains, or are we losing something?
I mean, I do have a very strong opinion about it. I mean, I would never put on oxygen again. So, if I do another 8,000 meter peak, I made that decision. I mean, I was in Dhaulagiri in when was I there? 2022. And I made it to Camp 3 and I was too tired. And I wouldn't have made it with oxygen, but I wouldn't have on Makalu, I still put on oxygen to get up. I wouldn't do that anymore. So that's my own personal thing. If I climb another one without oxygen. I mean, I think for people like yourself, of course, you have clients and it's a lot safer. Oxygen, I mean, you had Monica on the podcast. I mean, she's a great supporter of oxygen. Of course, it's better for your body. I mean, I do look now at these young girls who climb Everest and Lhotse within 2 days. They spent maybe 2 weeks at base camp. They sit next to me and I'm sure they did what they tell me that they did. Mm-hmm. They look like $1 million. I mean, Adrian, you and I mean, we're both quite thin when we come back from expedition, when we look awful.
We're wrecked.
I know. And I look at these young, I mean, of course, they're 20 years younger, but yes. So I think obviously we shouldn't be up there without supplemental oxygen. So that's the medical side of things, and also for the safety. But of course, I see people go from base camp and not really acclimatizing anymore. And there becomes the problem if you're not acclimatized properly. I mean, I don't need to tell you, let something go wrong with the oxygen up there and then you're in deep trouble. So we still slept at Camp 3 for a night when we climbed Everest. I mean, unless people do it without ours, nobody does it. People barely sleep at Camp 2. So
Billi, so just to interrupt, because it's such an interesting conversation and it's so pertinent to Alpenglow. We still on the north side try to have every client sleep at the North Col, which is the same altitude as Camp 3 on the south side. And it is an incredible battle to kind of get buy-in from our members of why that's so important when everybody else is now generally not even tagging that altitude. They go, maybe they tag 7. Many just go part way up the fixed lines and back down. So just to throw it out there is still a team sleeping at 7,000 meters. It's Alpenglow.
Very good. No, and I think it's so important. And I mean, you had this crazy, the crazy vent valve popping happening, when was it?
2018. We had something like 60% of our regulators fail above 8,500 meters. It was horrifying.
And people are not acclimatized, So but this is, let's hope the systems are good enough and the expedition leaders are happy. And we can go a step further and mention the whole xenon thing. I don't know whether you want to
bring it.
Xenon, till I bring it up? Okay. I can give you my own personal strong opinion. Okay, just for your audience. So this year there were 4 Brits who climbed Everest from London, Everest summit back to London in a week. Okay. They used something called xenon, which is an expensive drug from out of anesthetics. And that is supposed to create more red blood cells. So these guys did it in a week. I mean, it's not for me. I would never, ever do it. But Adrian, and you may be of a very different opinion, I honestly don't understand why this caused such a stir. If these guys
totally
let them do it.
Yeah.
Adrian, when I climbed Everest, I love it when I say that because when I climbed Everest, I mean, I was thinking, really? The doping commission would have a field day here. I mean, the drugs people take. And
Totally.
I mean, people do on summit day, they take dexamethasone, which is a huge, it's an adrenaline, that. So drugs are being taken, and we are taking the biggest drug, supplemental oxygen.
Absolutely.
So if we speak ethics, I mean, the ethics, climbing ethics on Everest, it's been out of the window for a long time. So xenon wouldn't be for me. I don't think it's a breakthrough. I don't think it's gonna, what's the word? I don't think many people will use it, but I honestly don't understand the big stir. Now, the question is, do you?
Yeah. So actually, I think you're not caught up yet. I think our Xenon episode released a few days ago. So listen to the most recent Duffel Shuffle podcast because we kind of went in deep. But the short version is my feeling with Xenon, the only reason I felt like it should perhaps be worthy of discussion was one, that I think it had nothing to do with the success of the team. The success of the team was based on 8-liter flow oxygen from base camp. Just like Elite's client did it in 4 days from New York, just with oxygen and no xenon. So I was a little annoyed that the media captured on this thing that actually isn't part of the story. The story is how much oxygen do we feel good about using and from where? And that's been a conversation within the commercial operators for decades. And I think we should continue having that conversation. The second thing with xenon was just, from talking to doctors like Hackett and Monica and things like that, there's actually no scientific evidence to suggest it would help. And there's plenty of reasons why it might be hazardous to people's health. And so, to me, I felt like, we as commercial operators, is it ethical to be experimenting on our clients in that way? So I think those two things were worth talking about around xenon. But I think the issue was much less, is it doping? Yes, of course it's doping. I guess the other part, Billy, that I feel is people have been doping in the mountains forever, right? Methamphetamines in the 80s and 90s, and then dexamethasone was really popular in the early 2010s. Today, I feel like there is a clear ethic amongst professional athletes. And I think it is the ethic we should hold to climbers setting records. The ethic is very clear that you don't use oxygen and you also don't use dexamethasone or any other banned substance like methamphetamines. You use caffeine, you don't use amphetamines, So I actually think that line is very clear amongst professional athletes, or at least the professional athletes that I respect and spend time with. But I think we do have to be talking about those things because there is this new group coming in of climbers trying to set records that maybe haven't come up in professional sports and don't maybe have the same respect for those lines. And I think we need to be talking about them in the same way that I feel we've always needed to be very honest about, did we have Sherpa support? Was the trail broken for us? Do we use fixed lines? Those, I think we shouldn't be telling people what they can and can't do, but we should be very clear about kind of the standard of professional climbing versus the standard of recreational climbing.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And I think it's also, we climbing Everest with and without oxygen, it's so, of course, the general public, and they don't need to know. They have other things on their mind, but it's such a huge difference, and how people climb. Adrian, you climb very different. And I was so flattered when you, sort of put me in the same bracket, but I'm way out of that bracket of your bracket. But, I climb and I'm open about it. I'm a client. Yeah. And I wouldn't get up the Lhotse face without a fixed rope. Of course not. And I do, totally agree. And I think, as long as we're honest, I think for me, the stir it caused, and you as an expedition leader, of course, you're not offering xenon, and if you have your, qualms about it, and why would you? Whereas for me, as a not really outsider, but I just saw that, oh my God, xenon, and I really didn't understand because we have been using the biggest drug, which is oxygen, and that's why. And I think we will, things evolve, and I think, it'll be interesting. You asked before, how do I see the database, or, how do I see Everest maybe in 20 years' time? I don't know. But what I find quite interesting, sort of the run to the 14 8,000 meter peaks. I mean, that's, it takes me away from Sion now, sorry, but,
Oh, it's great.
that it's, after NIMS, I mean, when I started for the Himalayan Database, I mean, I had like 10 or 12 people who were striving to climb all 14.
Right.
And, and after NIMS, there were 30, 40, mainly young women, which I thought was really interesting. A lot of young women.
Yeah.
But I do think that maybe that wave, maybe we'll have another year, maybe 2 or 3. But I think it'll come out of fashion again. I think at the moment it's like a fad. Oh my God, we've got to climb all 14, 8,000 meter peaks. And I say, tongue in cheek, maybe, in 5 years you fly to the moon but I think that trend, I mean, I think Everest will always be busy. But that's my own personal opinion, but I think that maybe that whole 14, 8,000 meter run, maybe that'll die down in the next 5 years. I don't know. So
yeah, well, go ahead.
I think it's really interesting. Well, I have a question for you, Billi. And, I think it's really interesting because as we see these shifts in how things are done, you can either look at it as like a fad or a temporary change or attempt to change how things are done, or it's like, industry shifting style. And I'm curious, Billi, if you can remember back to when Adrian kind of pioneered the use of hypoxic tents and rapid ascent and pre-acclimatization, what your perspective on that was. And then now, has your perspective changed as it's more widely used?
Okay, I've never used it. And when I first came out, I think Monica would also say, I don't know does Monica believe it or not in the hypoxic tents?
Today, certainly after thousands of clients that she's managed and seen the differences, absolutely not. She was, this is the funny thing now that everyone says they were into hypoxic training and hypoxic tents back in 2010. And I'm like, I know for a fact I was the only one because every other person out there just talked so much shit, including the people who love me most, like Monica.
Yeah. And I mean, I've never used it. I mean, when it first came out, I just thought, oh, rubbish. But I mean, yes, I've seen it and I'm sure it helps you or it helps you acclimatize or it acclimatizes you to, to a certain, to 6,000 meters, maybe 6.5?
Not even. We say 5,000. Like we just want to get people to base camp quickly. That's all we're doing. Everything else is normal.
Perfect. And I totally believe in it. Totally believe in it. But, now there's a Billi but.
I love it.
They acclimatize you to the altitude. But an expedition is a lot more, it's the food, it's the environment, it's the mountain, it's the risk, whatever. So, I mean, of course, I think your clients will probably feel better at base camp, but everything else that goes around is still there, So, yeah, so that's why I think it'll cut down your expedition time, but I still think you need the time. And I mean, you guys spend a lot of time at base camp, or you were on the mountain for 4 weeks, 3 weeks this year.
Yeah, this year we were like 32 days, 33 days, USA to USA. So yeah 4 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So you still need, I think, to go to the mountain, and I mean, like the 4 Brits or the Ukrainian American guy, I mean, they probably didn't even have time that anything sinks in, they didn't even have time to have the food. They didn't have time to see the people. So maybe you cut all that out when you do it in a week. But when you're there for longer, there is so many other things you have to acclimatize to. So but I'm sure, and more people use them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when Adrian was pioneering it, it was probably widely, people weren't into it. People weren't psyched on it. They didn't believe in it. And now it's arguably pretty commonplace in the sport. And so it just makes me wonder in 10, 15 years, are our oxygen uses going to change and that's just widely accepted? Is xenon gas going to be, widely used because it has proven to have some sort of benefit? Not that I believe that does now, but, it's just interesting to look at these things. And is it a fad? Is it an attempt? Or is it actually like industry shifting? And every time something new comes out, we have to wonder.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think it's like anywhere else in the world, we evolve. I mean, we no longer climb in the same gear we climbed 30 years ago. There's always new stuff coming out. And I think, with these things, yes, it will evolve. People try new regulators, new masks. I mean, there's always, we may see, I don't know, maybe we'll see a cable car of Everest soon.
I know, right? I mean, I could totally see it. And I think it would be more likely on the Nepal side than the Chinese side, actually. I think China is slightly further ahead in the, we need to keep this national park, and then this is where the tourists go, kind of like Grand Canyon in the United States. Millions of tourists, total chaos on the rim, but then the base is not. But I could totally see Nepal, with the right investors and the right opportunity, as I understand it, they hope millions of tourists will one day come to the Khumbu Valley. The only way that can happen is to completely transform transportation systems in the valley. And I could also imagine the draw of a cable car. It would be very hard to build, but I could see it, although I hope it doesn't happen. One thing optimism, one thing I think is interesting, I think 1 week climbs of Everest are definitely here to stay, and we're going to see a massive growth in that part of the industry. I don't think personally, as you've already heard, I don't think it'll be with Xenon, but perhaps I'll be wrong. Like Sam said, if over a decade we build the science behind it, it is more effective than dexamethasone or the other things some climbers use, then why wouldn't it be used by a climber trying to do the mountain as fast as possible? But we'll see how that goes. But 1 week climbs with oxygen and helicopters are here to stay. I'm sure of it. The exciting piece, the piece that makes me optimistic, is I think that will drive much more interest towards no oxygen climbing by people who see now this spectrum is this wide. You can make the climb as easy as you want. Truthfully, you really can make it as easy as you want. Rapid Ascent never did that. Hypoxic tents, like you just described, Billy, kept it hard. It was still hard. It was just shorter and hard. But oxygen can make it easy. And I think the part I'm excited about is now that we've gone to the natural conclusion of that, 4-day climbs of the mountain, well, that then opens up, I think, a group of people are going to say, well, why don't I try it in the hardest way? With support, I'm not a professional. I need guides. I need Sherpa. I need a safety net. But can I try it in this hard way?
Yeah. And I think, yes, this is one thing that people, start maybe again to say, okay, I'll do it the hard way. But what I've also been seeing over the last, 4 or 5 years, and that's a really cool development, that the more people are gallivanting around the 8,000 meter peaks, the more young climbers, real alpinists, go and seek out new goals,
Absolutely.
new mountains. They go to remote places. Last October, I had to look up the numbers, but last October we had so many first ascents of new routes, new mountains. And I do see this development that the more people are on the big ones, the more young people really, try and find interesting things. And I love that. I love meeting them and spending, only a couple of days ago, a German guy, they climbed, it was a 6,500 meter peak behind Himlong. And I wanted to meet him in Kathmandu, and we didn't. And he lives near Garmisch, and we did the interview here in Garmisch. And it was so interesting. They were just completely on their own. It wasn't necessarily difficult what they did, but hey, it was something new. Nobody had climbed that or, officially or registered climbed that peak. So I see that development, and I think that's really nice. And one more thing, whatever happens in the next 5 or 10 years, Adrian, I'm sure you and I are going to be surprised, because I've been surprised so many times in this. I think I know a lot, but I never thought that K2 would ever be commercialized as it is. It's now. When Nims first came out to do his 6-7 months thing, I was sitting in a cafe with Kenton, and Kenton said, "Oh, Billy, I'm going to eat my hat if that happens." And, and then Christian Harrell had 3 months and 1 day. So, these things, whether they all made it to the real summit, okay, that's a different conversation. But, all these
Billy just throws that little detail in.
And I've been surprised, and I'm sure we'll see some more surprises.
Well, no matter what, whether it's more no oxygen climbs of Everest or more new peaks, you're going to be busy, Billi, for as long as you want to be.
Yes, and I hope I can do. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether I'm going to live as long as Miss Hawley. She died when she was 94. I'm now 58. I have a few more years. I mean, maybe no. I really like to carry on as long as I can, and it's no longer so stressful. I mean, for a while it was really stressful because I was trying to speak to everybody, and then at one point I just thought, this is impossible and it's crazy. And now, my seasons are actually quite relaxed. I mean, people contact me, I see them, or I send them the link to the form, and then I seek out, as I say, last October, we had maybe 20 really interesting expeditions, and that's actually many because, in autumn, it's mainly Manaslu, a bit of Himlong, a bit of Amadablam, and that's about it. And that's a really nice development. So I hope I'm going to be busy for a lot longer. But as I say, I have my mum here, and she's 92 and she's a trooper. She's doing amazingly well. But of course, every time I go to Nepal, I always think, it's becoming harder. But, maybe there will be a season when I can't go, but, that will be for family reasons. But otherwise, I'm totally committed, totally to the database. I love it.
Oh, and it's your job to start finding the next Billi. Ms. Hawley found you. It's time for you to start. Consider you've got a long time, but that new energy is always exciting to see where the next generation will take the database. And I did want to agree with you. Like, I think it's so exciting seeing people, pushing out to these other mountains. I think it's always been going on, but it did feel for a while there that maybe like low mountain hard alpinism in the Himalaya was just not like the cool thing. And perhaps because of some of the commercialization of the 8,000 meter peaks, it's back in vogue. Like, guides who work for us are talking about like all these unnamed, unclimbed things that they're now dreaming about and using Google Earth. And I think that energy is really exciting. It's definitely part of the sport. If people do want to support the Himalayan database, how do they do that? And if people want to explore the Himalayan database, how do they do that?
Okay, I'll answer that in a minute. I just want to say one really important thing, and I've forgotten the Sherpa. Because we've just been talking about, the alpinists and the climbers who seek out new goals. And I think it's among the Sherpa, a wonderful development that the young Sherpa, they know the Himalayan database. Mingma Ji, I respect him very much, or Prakash. You have these young Rualing guides or Makalu guides, and they're certified mountain guides, and they go out and climb new peaks, and they get in touch with me, and they do it with a passion. Miss Hawley wouldn't believe it because it's a passion. But I think I remember there were these 3 guys, and I think they did 2 new peaks in the Rualing, and they got in touch with me. And I just thought, wow, that wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. So I think that's also really important to see that the Sherpa, they're becoming more professional, and they do some of these, not all of them, of course, they climb with a passion and they do it.
Absolutely.
And it's really cool. I think that's a really cool development. So,
I totally agree. It's so exciting. And seeing some Sherpas start to get financial support from brands, and, they do have this personal passion. So, it's always this combination of time, passion, and financial support to be able to climb for oneself. And I think it's exciting. We're going to see a lot of new route development from the Sherpa community.
Yeah, that's cool. So anyway, the Himalayan database, you can just go to himalayandatabase.com, and you can either, you can do searches online. So, if you wanted to know how many Americans have climbed Everest from the north side, you can type it all in. There's a thing, it says Himalayan database online or something. But if you do want to do a proper research, you can download it, and it's all for free. And yes, we have money? No. Every once in a while, Petzl sponsored us for 5 years. I think they gave us, I don't even know, because Richard Salisbury, who sits in Ann Arbor in Michigan, he was the one who digitalized the database in 2000. I think it came out in 2004. And he had the idea. And guess what? He had the idea in 1994. And it took 3 Nepali ladies to type in Miss Hawley's written notes. It took them 10 years. And I always say it took them 5 years to type and 5 years to decipher Miss Hawley. Because it was atrocious. Anyway, so it took them. So Richard Salisbury now, and then after Miss Hawley passed away, I think she was still alive. So we're now a non-profit organization. There is a donate button on our homepage. But I always, we've been discussing, okay, we could have a membership fee of $20 a year or something, and people would probably be happy to pay it. But in a way, I think it's a service I love doing for, the Himalayan community, and those who feel, oh, hey, you know what? We'll give the database $100 so we can take, as I say, I don't take any money. I'm very lucky that I have other jobs. But, for Toby, when he comes to Nepal, we pay him, we pay him $500 and we pay him the flight. So we always have enough money to do that. And the rest, Richard Salisbury is doing it for free. So, but, if you do want to donate, bring it on.
That was like the most anti-capitalistic answer I've ever heard to how can we give you money?
Yeah, don't give us any money. We love doing what we do.
Well, Billi, I hate to wrap this up because it's been a great conversation, but we do want to hear your best Duffel Shuffle story. And granted, you have an apartment in Kathmandu with all your climbing gear and your bike, so you probably don't travel with as many duffels to the Himalaya as most, but give us your best Duffel Shuffle story.
I have a Duffel Shuffle story. I was thinking about it. Okay. I climbed Manaslu twice. I climbed it in 2010 and in 2011 and in 2010 and 2011.
10 or 11.
Yes. When was your first time on Manaslu? 10?
No, first time on Manaslu would have been 8. Let's see, 8 when Cho Oyu closed. So I did it 8, 9, 10, and 11. And I remember one year with you, but I can't remember which one it was.
No, then I climbed it because you were there both years. So 2010, I wanted to climb it without oxygen. And I remember Russell, sorry, this is long again. I try not to be long.
It's all
Russell,
right.
I got to Camp 2. I was the slowest person that day.
Yeah.
Russell opens his tent. He looks out of this little hole and he says, Billi, you are supposed to impress me, not depress me. Okay, that was clearly using oxygen.
Oh, that's classic Russ.
Yeah, exactly. And then the following year, I went back to Manaslu and I did it without O's, and you were there as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in spring 2012, I went to Makalu. I came back from Germany. I went home and I wanted to pack my climbing gear. And I just thought, where is my barrel? So I rang Russell and I said, Russell, my barrel isn't here. I said, where is it? She said, Billi, I dropped off your barrel at your house. You know what Russell was like. He was like, of course I did. I said, no, you dropped it off when I came back from Lhotse, but I don't think you gave me my barrel. No, somebody must have stolen it. You better go through the Kathmandu shops and look for your climbing gear.
Oh, no.
Okay. I just thought, shit, I had nothing. I had no downsuit, but thank God I have good friends. So I rang. So Galinde brought me a pair of high altitude boots. I got a new down sleeping bag from Valandre and a down suit. It came by post to Kathmandu. I spent all day at the immigration and I had to pay loads of tax for import duty for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was just about to leave for Makalu and the phone rings. And Russell was there. He was in summer gown. And he said, Billi, guess what I'm standing in front of? And I said, So my Duffel Shuffle story is that Russell just left my barrel in summer gown, which is fine with so many barrels. And I just organized. And then I had everything double. So, then I had 2 down boots and 2 down bags. But yeah, that's my Duffel Shuffle story. So my barrel didn't get shuffled at all.
That's
That
great.
is amazing. I mean, 2 details for the listeners. So our barrel, we use these big blue barrels to keep all our gear and to keep it dry and away from animals and things like that when we store in Kathmandu and in the mountains. And Samagon is this tiny little town, just the most remote town you can imagine at the base of Manaslu. And yeah, that's wild. Of course, nothing ever gets stolen in Nepal, has always been my experience, but things definitely go missing. And
Except for nice bikes. Nice bikes get stolen in Nepal.
nice bikes now get stolen.
And nice old bikes don't get stolen.
There you go.
I love that. So second question, Billy, the next trip you're going on, the next expedition, whatever it might be, what is that first thing you will always throw into your duffel bags? Like the thing you would never travel without?
My mobile phone. I know it's a really... But you know
so
what?
True.
Yes, exactly. So I was thinking, what is of course I can say my Kindle or, my Himalayan charm, which I always wear. But actually, I wouldn't travel without my phone. And my phone is also my, or my inReach when I go to remote places because I need to be in touch with my family, with my mom. So that to me, that connection to my family, and you'll probably see it too, you guys with your, with your children and wives,
Yep.
That is so important. So I would not go without my phone or my inReach or my satellite phone.
The first honest guest we've had on the
It
Duffel
is
Shuffle.
So damn true. There is no other answer. Like no one can ever answer that question again because it's actually the truth. It's the first
Sorry,
thing
I
I would...
spoiled it all.
Might as well retire the podcast, Sam.
Anyway.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, Billy, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and hopefully we'll have you on again, maybe to talk about some new first ascents in the Himalaya in the future.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I was so excited. And I have to say, I normally do a few podcasts every once in a while, but I was actually a little bit nervous. I'm on the Duffel Shuffle. I'm so excited. I'm stoked, as Adrian would say.
Excellent. To all our future guests, you best be nervous. We're tough out here on the Duffel Shuffle. Billy, I can't wait to see you again in Kathmandu or on a mountain sometime soon. And just keep at it. Europe. Yeah, your spirit to the mountains in the Himalaya and to chronicling what's been done there and what continues to be done there. I think it's super important. So thanks for all you do.
And thank you guys for all you do. Adrian, without people like you, I wouldn't have done what I did. So thank you.
We've had a lot of fun out there.
Thanks for listening to the Duffel Shuffle podcast. You can follow along on Instagram, where we post our favorite clips from each episode, as well as more about the world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Catch you next time, and until then, we hope you enjoy some time outside.